Dan, you and I, we can't wait for the basketball season. And there is a big tournament coming to Seattle. The bracket just released. Scorebooklive.com/Washington. That's the Hardwood invite at Garfield High School, December 17th through the 20th. Big tournament coming back for year two. Ryan Menton of Hoop Source, the tournament director, joins us. Ryan, how we doing, man?
How are you guys doing? Doing well. This is coming up on now the nuts and bolts of the tournament. So just getting everything ready. We've got a lot of exciting kind of nuances to the tournament this year that we've seen other operators run their tournaments. And the biggest thing we want to do with this tournament is continue to innovate, continue to grow. We've got some exciting stuff, like I said, that players, coaches, teams have never really been privy to in around the country even, as we've analyzed some different tournaments. So just getting those kind of cool nuances and additions to the tournament as we continue to build this thing after year two and beyond. So it's a little stressful, but we'll get there. We're going to make it happen. It's a lot stressful, I should say. It's a lot stressful.
I was gonna say, Ryan, you and I have known each other for a number of years, and you work well under pressure. You will work well under stress with running a number of tournaments throughout the year. But this is on another level because you got some great teams in the state of Washington. You got some national level teams that are coming. What's the amount of sleep like right now, and how many requests do you get from coaches to kind of help their schedules leading into your event?
We get this. I'll tell you what, I'll be honest with you, actually, last year we actually got quite a few requests in terms of guys kind of like politicking their team, asking for certain things. And we take all that into consideration. It doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to inform. Like I mentioned last time we spoke, I mean, I take all that in, whether it's from the coaches that are directly involved. I hear from coaches that aren't involved, such as a good buddy of mine, Bill Backamus, who is a good buddy of mine, who obviously has been around and a guru, a coaching legend. He always has a little bit of input as well. You guys, I mean, I really kind of pin it off of the people that have a lot of knowledge. So this year, surprisingly enough, actually, I didn't hear from too many coaches. I think I heard from two, which is actually a record in only a short existence. The Hardwood's only 2 years old, but I've heard from two people this year. So that's actually really good. And like I said, I listen, I hear them out, right? I'm never going to be the guy, I told you this last time, I'm not going to be the guy that's like, just let me do my thing. I take those things in. I'm open door policy around here.
Ryan, we talked last time we went live when the field was unveiled about just, the matchup of the championship game last year at Auburn High School. It was Garfield-Auburn. It was a kind of de facto state championship preview, 1v2. I know they didn't end up winning the state title, but you talk about kind of how you approach seeding a field like this and creating a bracket where, you're maximizing matchups. You're also kind of analyzing talent. Now that the brackets are unveiled, how did you kind of look at and approach that, and were there any kind of key matchups that stood out for you in the process?
Yeah, one of the things we really looked at was a couple of things that always go into the thing is the strength of the program. So the program history, right? And Dan pointed out last time, like a Josh Wilson is a great example, over at Tumwater. We know what Josh Wilson's going to bring to the table because we know what type of coach Josh Wilson is. There's other guys that I could go on. Joe Stack now taking over for Kings, Brandon Roy and Trey, over there at Garfield. So, I mean, we know what those guys are going to bring, right? We have new blood in necessarily, so to speak, for this year with a lot of new teams, playing in the Hardwood. So we've got to look at those guys and analyze, again, strength of their program. But then it comes down to, I mean, quite honestly, quite frankly, your talent level. And so what guys and what does your roster look like? That ultimately is what it comes down to. And so we take those other, small things, although they add up to big things. And then it comes down to what type of team and what kind of roster you're able to put together. And that ultimately is going to decide kind of where you're going to fall into pieces and where the seeding process actually ultimately begins. So you go down the line, you go, with the players that we have this year, which we feel like, I know, Andy offline, we were talking about in terms of comparison to other tournaments. We never want to compare. I mean, everybody out there does their own, great job with their own tournaments. We look at ourselves, but we're very happy and comfortable with the level of talent that is actually going to be on display for this Hardwood. Last year was a little bit more national. This year's a little less national, but next year we've already got some commitments, obviously, from two top powerhouses that want to come and play. This year we got stuck with, we talked about it a little bit, with the sanctioning processes, again, with the powers to be, and that's unfortunate. But again, really what's going to spotlight and really sparkle in this event is the Oregon and Washington teams, and that we're happy about because this is a Washington-bred tournament. This is for the Seattle folks to shine the soft spotlight on Seattle. That's the whole reason we're in Seattle and why we're doing it, and then sprinkle in some of those other talents around the regions, outside the area. So again, going back to the original question, yeah, it really comes down to that roster and what kind of talent you're going to bring on the floor and how we feel like you're going to perform, against a specific matchup to make sure that those matchups are good. Because if people want to see a show, they want to come see good basketball. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to provide, and obviously have, those type of matchups at least at some point, reveal that. You look at some special matchups, you look at some key matchups. You've got a Washington team that's from Tacoma that's going to go up against the Goliath of Garfield, and talking to both those coaches, Washington's going to have to put all their effort in a situation like that. But you also have to make sure that it's fair to the rest of the field. And so looking at the talent level where the program's at, and then also keying in on the matchups later. So who will Garfield potentially play if they win, they lose, and vice versa, all down the line, so that we can create those key matchups down the line as well.
Yeah, you look at, obviously some of the matchups that are in this field. It's a heavy Washington field. There's some good Oregon schools coming up. I think one of the things that we talked about in our last Instagram Live that stood out to me was, there are teams, no matter how big or small the classification, that, feel and confidently feel and have a reason to feel like they could come in and take down and really compete with a Garfield or, any of the number of bigger school teams like Silas or whatnot, Bellevue. Did you kind of factor that in when, deciding these teams? We're looking for, coaches and teams and players, no matter the school size, that bring kind of that winning tradition?
100%, absolutely. And we talked about it last time. A school like Annie Wright. Annie Wright is on the come up. They're a very strong school. I was talking to the coach from Mountainside, obviously the matchup there, and talking to him about that matchup a little bit today. And he's excited. He's pumped because he knows that obviously no matter what reflects example, the strength of schedule is key for all of these teams. And so obviously RPI comes into factor, and it doesn't matter if you're 1A or 4A. It really doesn't matter, especially depending on, obviously if those teams 1A through 4, 6 in our classification here in Oregon, how they perform the rest of the year, right? So as long as it's a win-win, as long as everybody wins, right? So speaking of, like, Annie Wright is a great example. Annie Wright is, a smaller school. Now, one of the reasons why we believe in this tournament so wholeheartedly is because we've said this before. It's not a knock on Oregon. It's not a knock on California. It's not a knock on any other surrounding state, Idaho or anything above. I'm born and raised Portland, right? But at the time, at this current moment, and that could change, it's cyclical, talent goes up and down. We've seen that. But Oregon basketball is a step behind Washington basketball in terms of talent. I truly believe that. I know it's a bold statement, but right now in this moment, and that's not to say Oregon doesn't have great basketball players. Of course they do. They're littered with them. But Seattle has a stronger tradition, and Seattle's bigger, right? But for example, in case my point, you take a 1A Annie Wright, or you take a small school Annie Wright, for example, they would come into Oregon and they would have their way with a lot of 6A teams. And again, going classification to classification. Whereas in reverse, if you take a 1A Oregon team and bring them up to Washington, they're going to struggle in many ways, and some will have success, some won't. And so that's why we believe in the tournament. Again, it's not a knock on Oregon. I'm sure, trust me, I bleed Oregon, Oregon basketball. I was born and raised. I played at Beaverton. I coached here at Central and at Beaverton. So for me, I bleed it. But my biggest thing is just comparing right now where the state of basketball is. Washington does have an upper hand. There's just a lot of talent in Washington basketball. That's all I mean by that.
Hey, those are Ryan. I grew up on the border of Oregon and Washington. You know this.
Sure did.
Vancouver, yeah. Washington. I would always go over to Portland and play open gyms and play summer leagues, all those different things. So those are some strong words that are coming there because there's a lot of pride in Oregon versus Washington over the years. I'm curious as to how the ticket situation is going. Are you seeing a great response? If people want to be able to make that journey up to the Seattle area, how do they get tickets?
Tickets, you go to hardwood.com, hardwoodinvite.com. Tickets are still available. You will be available to pick up and purchase those tickets, actually at the door, when you come to the event. But also you will, 100%. You can buy the pre-pass, which that saves you an extra $50, which is a great discount online. And that's for somebody that, parents, players that want to take in the whole sessions. It's a tournament pass that's available online for a special discount. Obviously, if you just want to come and catch in a game here or there, your best bet's going to actually come and pick up at the door at Garfield on the day of whatever game or whatever session you want to take in for that particular matchup. But hardwoodinvite.com. It has all of the information. It's got the drop-in schedule. It's got all highlights from last year, highlights on the event, all that good stuff. So you can check it out there.
Ryan, I know, of course, I guess to start this off, December 17th at 9 a.m., that Bellevue and Chief Sealth game is the first game of a jam-packed first round, and that's a jam-packed several days of this tournament. Before we get out of here, bracket obviously live on scorebookslive.com/Washington, live on hardwoodinvite.com. For this Washington audience, is there one team from Oregon? I don't need you to pick a favorite, but maybe a team that folks up in Washington might not know about that might come up and make some noise.
Well, Roosevelt is one of those teams, and Roosevelt obviously lost their key player, Terrence Hill, right? He obviously is at Arizona Compass doing his thing, doing a great thing. We wish him well. But Roosevelt obviously still has key returners. You got Utrilla Morris, you got Chance White, you've got some other players that are going to really make some noise. And then, if I were to go all down the line, the Oregon teams that we have coming up are really strong and solid. South Medford is one. They take on Central Catholic tonight. It'd be interesting to see how that game goes. But South Medford is a gritty team. They were in it last year, had Garfield on the ropes, had them down 5 at halftime, and then ended up losing that game. And then beat, they knocked in Winter Haven with the 5-star Dylan James that just committed to Georgia from Winter Haven, Florida. They knocked them out in the second round. So they're a feisty team. And then you got Mountainside, who's always traditionally, Dustin Hewitt always has those guys prepped and ready to go. And like I said, we even have Benson, and Benson's got a couple talented guys. So the team out of those four, I would say probably, if I were looking at it, Roosevelt's probably the one that people are going to have the most eyes on. They play a really fast pace, up and down. They can get in your shorts in terms of playing defense and just being on you. And they've just got the talent around it. And that's strong talent. And Yusuf Leary, who's a young coach, does a really fantastic job with them. So. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent. There's some teams from Oregon that obviously, we didn't get to early enough, like a Westland and some other guys, and Beaverton that's going to be really good this year. They've talked about interest for next year. So, we'll continue, like I said, the hardwoodinvite.com. We'll continue to build this thing. We're excited to rep Seattle and bring Oregon over and some of the national teams and just really continue to build this event. We appreciate all the support. There's been a really good, especially in year 2, there's been a really strong support and a really strong response from the city of Seattle. So we're excited for it.
High school hoops coming to Seattle, hardwoodinvite.com, 4 tickets, and the full bracket at scorebookslive.com/Washington. Andy Bueller here with SB Live, as well as Dan Dickow and Ryan Menton, Tournament Director of Hoop Source. Jans, thanks for joining, and happy hoop season.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you, guys. You guys have a good one.
It's here. Hardwood Invite is one of many great tournaments we're going to be covering on Scorebook Live, so that's great to hear.
Stay tuned. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.